The dawn over Sablemarsh should have been peaceful, but something in the reeds wasn't right. Deputy Orrin Calloway almost drove past it. A faint shape curled beneath an overturned skiff, barely moving. When he stepped out of his patrol SUV, the breath caught in his throat. A German shepherd, soaked, shivering, tangled cruelly in discarded fishing line. And at her belly, 4 tiny puppies, weak, cold, fighting for life. Orrin freed them with numb hands, but the mother dog wasn't looking at him. Her amber eyes were fixed on the marsh, barking, pleading, warning him of something hidden in the darkness. Moments later, Orrin learned the truth, and what he uncovered would change everything. Before we begin, hit like, share, and subscribe, and tell us, where are you watching from? A thin spring chill drifted over the Sablemarsh wetlands, carrying the scent of damp reeds and distant thunder. Deputy Orrin Calloway drove slowly along the levee road, his patrol SUV humming softly as the moon shimmered across the swamp's black water. Orrin, at 39, was a man carved more by silence than by age. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a square jaw and a thin line of stubble that never quite disappeared no matter how often he shaved. His hair, charcoal black with early streaks of silver, fell in exhausted waves across his forehead, and deep creases framed his gray-blue eyes, the kind that held both watchfulness and a quiet sorrow. A rescue failure 3 years earlier still haunted him, a night when a missing teenager slipped beneath floodwater before Orrin could reach him. The guilt had rooted itself inside him, souring his sleep and sharpening his protectiveness toward anything vulnerable. Tonight he expected nothing more than another lonely patrol shift, the kind where even the frogs kept their voices low. But then a flicker, something reflecting moonlight, cut across the embankment. Orrin slowed, leaning forward, breath hitching with an instinct he trusted more than radio calls. He stepped out of the SUV, boots sinking slightly into the soft mud as the night wrapped around him with its murky dampness. The air smelled of mud, old wood, and a hint of brackish decay rising from the cattails. He followed the faint glimmer and stopped short. A small wooden skiff lay overturned near the reeds, half covered in algae and silt, and beneath its crooked hull, tangled in a mess of discarded fishing line, was a German shepherd. She was a large female, around 5 or 6 years old. Her coat a mix of sand brown and charcoal, now soaked and plastered to her trembling body. Her ribs shivered violently beneath her fur, not only from cold but from days of exhaustion. Despite the mud on her paws and the cuts on her flank where the lines had bitten into her skin, the dog carried a dignity. Ears tall, gaze alert, posture protective even in weakness. Her eyes, dark amber, wide and shining, tracked Orrin with an expression not of fear, but of pleading. At her belly, 4 tiny puppies, no more than 2 weeks old, huddled together in a pathetic, shivering heap. Their fur, still fuzzy and thin, clung to them like damp cotton. Their noses twitched weakly as they burrowed into their mother's side, searching for heat. Orrin's chest tightened as if someone had reached inside and squeezed the breath from him. Something about the scene, the silent endurance of the mother, the fragile rise and fall of the puppy's breaths, hit the same soft place inside him that he kept carefully barricaded. It reminded him too sharply of all the helplessness he had once failed to prevent. He knelt slowly, lowering himself so he wouldn't frighten them, though the mother dog showed no sign of aggression. Instead, she shifted her weight so her body shielded her. Puppies better from the wind gusting over the marsh. Orrin whispered, "Easy, girl." His voice came out rougher than intended, scraping against the rawness of his memories. He reached forward cautiously, touching the fishing line. The dog didn't flinch. She only cast a quick glance toward the tall rushes behind him. That caught his attention. Her stare was intense, urgent, as if she wanted him to look, really look, at whatever lay deeper within the marsh. Orrin followed her gaze, but the cattails swayed in the dim light, hiding whatever truth stirred within them. He returned his focus to freeing her. The tangled monofilament was thin but strong, bound cruelly around her hind legs and snagged beneath the boat's wooden ribs. Orin worked methodically, fingers numb from the cold slime of the wet line. The dog whimpered softly each time he tugged, not from fear but from pain she was too tired to hide. "Hang on, I've got you," he murmured. The wind strengthened, carrying a faint creaking sound through the marsh. Perhaps branches, perhaps something else. Orin felt that old protective instinct rising like a tide, the one that made him walk toward danger rather than back away. Why here? Why this dog? Why this boat overturned in a way that didn't feel accidental? When the last strand snapped loose, the dog didn't run. Instead, she stepped forward shakily, nudging Orin's knee before turning again toward the rushes, issuing a low, urgent whine from deep in her chest. The puppies mewled and shifted, their tiny bodies trembling. Orin lifted his gaze once more, and this time a strange unease prickled his spine. In the dense shadows of the marsh grass, he could have sworn something or someone moved. The moon slid behind a cloud, plunging the scene into deeper gloom, and the mother dog took one hesitant step toward the darkness, then looked back at him, expectation shining in her tired amber eyes. Orin swallowed, feeling the night grow heavier around them. Whatever had brought her here wasn't finished yet. Orin tightened his grip on the flashlight as the moon struggled behind drifting clouds, its pale glow barely reaching through the curtain of swaying reeds. The mother German shepherd, still trembling from exhaustion yet fueled by something fierce and instinctive, bounded ahead with uneven but determined strides. Her coat, still damp and streaked with mud, glimmered with faint silver patches where the moonlight brushed across. Behind Orin's chest, inside his jacket, the 4 tiny puppies pressed together, their fragile bodies radiating small pulses of warmth against him, their breaths fluttering like soft sparks of life. As he followed the dog deeper into the marsh, each step sank into wet soil that clung stubbornly to his boots, releasing cold water that seeped into his socks. The night air carried a texture of tension he couldn't quite decipher, part fear, part urgency, part something unspoken. The German shepherd suddenly paused, her ears pricking forward, nose lifted, nostrils quivering. She issued a low, rumbling whine and scratched anxiously at a patch of cattails. Orin swept the flashlight beam across the area and saw a small shape slumped in the mud, a child's backpack, faded teal, soaked through by swamp water. When he picked it up, the zipper pulled sluggishly, heavy with mud, and the name Marlin appeared in peeling white marker ink. The sight twisted his stomach. The handwriting was small and uneven, like a school kid's. A child had been here recently. Orin had learned to read landscapes like open books, and the footprints half swallowed by mud confirmed it. A pair of small shoes, maybe belonging to a boy or girl around 10 years old, dragged along in panic or exhaustion. As he crouched to inspect the prints, the mother dog began digging furiously in a soft patch of mud nearby. Orin jogged over and knelt beside her, brushing aside the loose dirt she had scattered. Something metallic glinted. He reached in and unearthed a small tin box, rusted around the edges but sealed tight. When he pried it open, a damp smell of old paper and wet cloth wafted up. Inside lay a creased photograph of a young woman holding a boy around 6 or 7. The woman had long auburn hair pulled into a loose braid, freckles dusted across her pale cheeks, and large brown eyes that radiated both warmth and fatigue. Her smile was gentle but strained, as if life had pressed heavily on her shoulders. The boy, pressed against her side, shared her eyes, but carried a livelier spark. Messy, dark blonde hair, a gap between his front teeth, and a grin that suggested mischief and innocence living side by side. Beneath the photo was a note, the ink blurred but still legible. "If anyone finds this, please save them. I'll come back when I can get free." Orin felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. This wasn't a careless abandonment. It wasn't cruelty. It was desperation. Someone fighting to protect their family and forced into impossible decisions. He swallowed and looked at the mother dog. "You're trying to show me something," he murmured. She stared back with those amber eyes, and he sensed a depth in them, fear for her pups, loyalty to her humans, and a determination that felt almost human. A rustling noise snapped through the reeds. Oren froze. The mother dog's ears shot up, and she emitted a sharp bark, not aggressive, but warning. The reeds parted, revealing a man stumbling toward them. He was tall and narrow-shouldered, in his mid-40s, with hollow cheeks and a sunken jawline. His beard was patchy, reddish-blonde, and flecked heavily with gray. His clothes, mud-splattered cargo pants and a flannel shirt, missing buttons, hung loosely from his lanky frame. He clutched a fishing lantern with a trembling hand. "Hey!" Oren called out, shifting his stance, free hand instinctively lowering toward his holster. "Stop right there!" The man startled, lantern jerking wildly. His wide blue eyes darted around, pupils dilated in fear. I'm not... Please," he stammered, lifting his free hand. "I didn't mean to scare anyone." Oren studied him closely. His eyes were bloodshot, his posture slouched not with aggression, but exhaustion. The man looked like someone who hadn't slept, eaten, or stopped worrying in days. "Name?" Oren demanded. Darian Holt," the man replied, voice quivering. "I live by the old shrimping shack south of here. I heard barking, and I thought someone might need help." Oren noted the sincerity in his tone, but remained cautious. Darian's face bore soft creases of a man worn thin by life. Too many years working low-wage mechanical jobs. Too many disappointments, perhaps a personal loss that dimmed his gaze. "You see anyone else out here?" Oren asked. Darian shook his head. "No, just shadows and noises. This marsh carries voices, you know. Sometimes not real ones." The last sentence hinted at someone frayed at the edges, emotionally, perhaps lonely, perhaps dealing with grief he hadn't spoken aloud. The mother dog growled softly, not at Darian, but toward something deeper in the reeds. All three turned instinctively. A faint splash echoed like someone slogging through shallow water, then silence. Oren felt his pulse intensify. Someone was still out here. Someone connected to the backpack, the box, the note. "Darian," Oren said, voice firm but measured. "Head back to the road. If you see anyone, call it in, understand?" Darian nodded shakily and backed away, his lantern bobbing like a lost star in the dark. When he disappeared behind the reeds, Oren knelt beside the mother dog again. She pressed her nose against the photo in his hand, then looked toward the swamp with unmistakable urgency. "All right," he whispered. "Lead the way." She moved forward with renewed determination, paws splashing through the shallow water. Oren followed, the puppies warm against his chest, the darkness gathering behind them like a closing mouth. He didn't know what waited deeper inside Sablemarsh, but someone had left a trail for a reason, and he was no longer willing to ignore the call for help, written in mud, in desperation, and in the trembling amber eyes of a mother fighting for more than her own life. The first growl of thunder rolled across Sablemarsh like a warning rumbling through the ribs of the earth. Oren tightened his hold on the puppies inside his jacket as the mother German shepherd pressed ahead, weaving through thickets of wild myrtle and waterlogged brush. Each flash of distant lightning illuminated her silhouette, ears tall, tail low, muscles taut with purpose. The marsh around them darkened as thick clouds swallowed the moon. A damp wind rose, rippling the reeds and carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth. Oren's boots splashed through ankle-deep puddles, and the air crackled with the metallic tension of an approaching storm. His breath came out in uneven bursts, part exhaustion, part fear of what they were about to find. The dog suddenly barked once, sharply, then bounded toward the open patch of muddy ground ahead. The vegetation thinned, giving way to a flooded dirt road, and there, half tilted against a cypress trunk, was a small white van, its back end buried in mud, windshield webbed with cracks. Oren's pulse slammed against his neck. He recognized the license plate from the county's missing person bulletin. Someone had reported seeing a vehicle like this abandoned 2 nights ago, but in the storm's chaos, the search had been suspended. Now, he knew why no one had found it. The van had skidded off a narrow service road and into the marsh, hidden by reeds thick enough to swallow a house. The German shepherd whined loudly and clawed at the window, her nails scraping against the fogged, cracked glass. Her entire body vibrated with urgency. Oren shifted the puppies carefully inside his jacket, then pulled a small crowbar from his utility pouch. Lightning flared, outlining the van and the dog in stark white. He slid the tip of the bar beneath the bent frame of the passenger door and heaved with all his strength. At first, the metal resisted, groaning in protest before giving way with a sharp crack. The door jerked open. Inside, slumped across the front seats, was a woman. The woman from the photograph. Her long auburn hair was tangled in wet strands across her face, skin pale beneath a sheen of cold sweat. Her lips were tinged blue, breathing shallow and trembling. She looked young, late 20s, maybe 30, her face delicate but gaunt from the cold. Deep tear tracks stained her cheeks, smeared with mud. She wore a simple denim jacket and dark jeans soaked through by rain leaking from the shattered window. Despite her fragile appearance, her features hinted at endurance. High cheekbones, a strong chin softened by exhaustion, and fingers calloused in the way of someone used to hard work. Lightning crashed again, closer this time, and thunder followed with a violent shaking roar. Oren reached in, his gloves brushing her cold skin. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he shouted, but her eyes fluttered only weakly before rolling shut again. The German shepherd reared up onto the seat, whining frantically and nudging her arm with her muzzle. "She's alive?" Oren breathed, relief and dread mixing inside him. "Barely." He slid his arms beneath her and lifted her from the seat, her limp body folding against him. She felt dangerously light, like someone who had eaten too little for too long and fought too hard for the last of her strength. Rain began to fall. At first only a few drops, but within seconds the sky split open and poured down in sheets. The wind whipped through the marsh, bending reeds nearly flat, lashing Oren's face with stinging droplets. He tapped his radio. "Dispatch, this is Deputy Calloway. I have one adult female, unconscious, hypothermic. Location, North Sablemarsh Access Road, half a mile past Marker 9. I repeat, need immediate medical extraction." Static crackled through the speaker before a voice broke through. "Female, firm, professional. Copy that, Calloway. Ambulance ETA, 25 minutes. Storms slowing everything. Keep her stable." The voice belonged to dispatcher Lila Gray, a woman in her early 40s whose calm demeanor had held the department together through hurricanes, floods, and every kind of chaos. Lila was known for her sharp mind and no-nonsense tone. Matched with a surprisingly warm heart, she hid behind clipped words and crisp radio etiquette. She wasn't on scene, but her presence on the line grounded Oren. "Roger," he replied. He shifted the woman's weight carefully and started toward the higher patch of ground to the west. The mother dog stayed glued to his side, ears flattening each time thunder boomed overhead. The puppies squirmed, sensing the cold rain, but sheltered inside his jacket. Their tiny noses pressed against his shirt, breathing in weak, rhythmic pulses. Oren's muscles burned from balancing the woman's weight and the soft warmth of the puppies, but he pushed forward, teeth clenched against the cold. Lightning illuminated the path, and for a moment he caught sight of something further down the flooded road. Tire marks, deep and erratic, suggesting the van had skidded while trying to avoid something, or someone. The rain washed over the prints quickly, blurring them into the mud. Not an accident, he thought, a chase or a threat, something more than bad weather. He kept moving. The storm intensified, wind screaming through the treetops. The woman stirred faintly in his arms, her head lolling toward his shoulder. Oren leaned closer, trying to hear her voice over the storm. A whisper escaped her lips. Marlin. The name from the backpack. Her son. She was calling for him. Oren's jaw tightened. He didn't know where the boy was, but he knew one thing with certainty. This woman had nearly died trying to protect him. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the swollen riverbank just ahead. Water churned violently as runoff from the storm surged in. He spotted a narrow stretch of elevated ground, a small island of dry soil beneath its hull, overhanging cypress. It wasn't much, but it was the only safe spot available. He carried the woman there, kneeling as he lowered her gently onto the driest patch. The German shepherd curled around her immediately, shielding her from the wind with her own battered body. Oren checked her pulse, weak but steady. He shrugged off his outer jacket and draped it over her. The cold sank deeper into his bones, but he ignored it. Far off, faint but growing louder, came the wail of an approaching siren struggling through the storm. He exhaled shakily. "Hang on," he whispered to both the woman and the dog. "Help's coming." Above them, thunder bellowed like a warning that the night wasn't done revealing its dangers. The storm had weakened by the time Oren reached Sanborn Marshside Clinic, but the sky still churned with leftover clouds, bruised purple and streaked with wind-scattered rain. The clinic itself was a squat, weather-beaten building with white paint peeling from its wooden siding and a metal roof that pinged faintly every time a stray raindrop fell. Though small, it carried the unmistakable scent of antiseptic, old plaster, and quiet human hope. Inside, the hallways hummed with a low efficiency, the kind born not from abundance but necessity. Marshside Clinic was used to treating fishermen with deep cuts, farmers with heat exhaustion, and hikers lost to the swamp's unpredictable moods. Tonight, though, the staff worked with sharper intensity, aware that a woman had been dragged from death's edge. The puppies were immediately taken by a veterinary nurse, a thin, soft-spoken young woman named Isolde Kern, who looked barely 20 but moved with the calm precision of someone twice her age. Isolde had a narrow, delicate face framed by wavy, ash-blonde hair pinned back into a messy bun. Her pale skin was sprinkled with light freckles, and she wore round glasses that gave her a studious air. Despite looking fragile, she possessed a quiet resilience, a trait forged from growing up as the daughter of a single father who spent weeks offshore, leaving her to manage the household and develop independence early. Isolde did not speak much, but when she held the puppies against a warm towel, her expression softened. "They're cold, but they'll make it," she murmured, more to the puppies than to Oren. Meanwhile, the mother dog, Cora, sat planted directly outside the emergency room door. She was soaked, exhausted, and trembling slightly, yet her gaze never left the frosted glass window. Every sound from inside made her ears twitch, but she stayed silent and rigid, a sentinel carved from devotion. Inside the emergency room, nurses and a lone physician worked on the woman. The physician, Dr. Varick Lorne, was a man in his early 50s with iron-gray hair combed back neatly, a strong jaw lined with salt and pepper stubble, and deep-set hazel eyes carrying the weight of decades in rural medicine. His skin was tanned from fishing on weekends, but faint wrinkles traced the edges of his eyes, signs of nights spent fighting sleep in overlong shifts. Varick was known around Sanborn Parish as a man whose compassion was wrapped in dry humor and strict rules. Years earlier, he had lost a sibling to a preventable medical error in a city hospital, a tragedy that simmered beneath his calm exterior and made him fiercely protective of every patient who walked through his doors. He monitored the woman, Elara, with the intensity of someone unwilling to lose another life under his watch. An hour slipped by slowly. The murmur of machines blended with the soft tapping of rain on the window, forming a fragile rhythm. Oren sat in the hallway's wooden chair, his jacket thrown over his knee, boots dripping marsh water onto the floor. He watched Cora, the way her chest rose and fell in tight, anxious breaths. He wondered how an animal could embody loyalty so absolute it rivaled any human bond he'd seen. The night pressed heavily on him, bringing with it memories he preferred buried, memories of a storm years earlier, a missing teenager, a rescue attempt that ended with a grieving family and guilt that clung to him like mud. Now, faced with Cora's unwavering faith, He felt that guilt tighten again, only this time there was something else layered beneath it. Resolve. At last, a nurse opened the door. Cora surged forward, tail thumping once against the floor before she caught herself. "She's awake," the nurse said softly. "Weak but conscious." Oren rose, following Cora as she slipped into the room with surprising gentleness for a dog her size. Ilara Niven lay on the bed, her cheeks flushed faintly with returning warmth. Up close, her features appeared even more striking. Sharp cheekbones, soft rounded lips, and deep brown eyes still glazed with fatigue. Her auburn hair, washed and brushed back by the nurses, spilled across the pillow in waves. She blinked slowly as Cora approached, recognition flooding her expression. Her voice cracked into a gasp. "Cora!" Tears welled instantly, spilling down her cheeks as the dog pressed her head gently against her shoulder. Ilara lifted trembling hands to cup Cora's muzzle, whispering broken apologies into her fur. "You saved them. You kept them alive." The room for a moment felt suspended in stillness, like the world itself held its breath. Oren lingered near the doorway, unsure whether to intrude on the reunion, but then Ilara looked up at him. Her gaze held gratitude so fierce it nearly undid him. "You found us," she whispered. "You found her, my babies." Oren swallowed, the heat of emotion rising unexpectedly in his chest. "Cora found them," he said. "I just followed where she told me to go." Ilara tried to smile, but exhaustion made it waver. She glanced toward Dr. Lorne, who hovered near her vitals monitor, arms folded. He nodded approvingly at Oren. At that moment, lightning flashed outside, not harsh like earlier, but soft, illuminating the marsh through the window with a gentle glow. Ilara's voice was faint but clear. "My son is still out there," she said. "Marlin, he ran when the van hit the tree. I told him to. I told him to run and hide." Cora's ears perked sharply. Oren felt the storm return, this time not from the sky, but from the weight of her words. The woman he had saved was not the end of the trail. She was only the beginning. And as Cora's eyes darted toward the window, filled with renewed urgency, Oren knew the night was far from over. 2 weeks later, sunlight rose gently over Sablemarsh, draping the wetlands in a soft gold that shimmered across the still water like dust scattered by a waking world. The violent storms of the previous nights had faded into memory, replaced with the damp serenity of early spring. Birds called lazily from cypress branches, and thin mist curled upward from the marsh as if reluctant to let go of the night. Oren Calloway drove slowly along the narrow gravel road leading toward Ilara Niven's new home, a small wooden cabin perched at the edge of the wetlands. The cabin had been offered temporarily by the county until Ilara could rebuild her life. Local volunteers had patched its roof, repaired its porch, and stocked it with essentials. As Oren stepped out of his SUV, the wooden steps creaked under his boots. Warm morning air brushed past him, carrying the scent of wet moss and new growth. He paused a moment, letting the tranquility settle into him. After everything they had survived, the storm, the search, the fear, this peace felt almost unreal. The door swung open before he could knock, and Ilara emerged with a soft smile. She looked healthier, color had returned to her cheeks, and though she still moved carefully due to the bruised ribs and fatigue lingering from hypothermia, her steps were steadier. Her auburn hair, now brushed and sunlit, fell in loose waves down her shoulders. She wore a simple cream sweater over faded jeans, bare feet padding softly across the porch boards. There was a quiet strength about her now, something forged by surviving what should have taken her life. Her brown eyes, once dulled by exhaustion, carried a warmth and a flicker of newfound determination. "You didn't have to come all this way," she said, leaning lightly on the doorframe. Oren shook his head. "I did. Wanted to see how everyone's doing." A blur of motion raced across the porch. 4 puppies, healthy, chubby, and stumbling in chaotic joy. Their fur had fluffed out in the weeks of recovery. one sandy gray, one black and tan, and two mottled with mixed patches of cream and chestnut. They bumbled over each other, tiny tails wagging frantically as they attempted to greet Orin all at once. He laughed, kneeling as the puppies swarmed him, tugging at his shoelaces and pawing at his hands. Their small bodies radiated warmth and boundless energy. Behind them, Cora stepped onto the porch with a calmness that contrasted the chaos of her pups. Her fur gleamed now, brushed to a soft sheen, and she carried herself with a gentle confidence. When she reached Orin, she placed her head into his palm, slow, deliberate, grateful. He rubbed behind her ears. "Good to see you too, girl." Elara watched the exchange with a look that blended affection and something deeper, an acknowledgement of everything Orin had done and everything Cora had endured. "Come in," she said. "There's someone I'd like you to meet again." Orin rose and followed. Her inside. The interior of the cabin was small but warm. Sunlight filtered through thin curtains and landed across a handmade quilt draped over a couch. A kettle steamed softly on the stove. Sitting at the kitchen table was a boy, small, with dark blonde hair and wide brown eyes. Marlin. He had been found 3 days after the storm, hiding inside a dilapidated storage shed nearly a mile from where the van crashed. He'd survived on rainwater dripping from the roof and packets of crackers he found in a forgotten toolbox. When rescue teams reached him, he had been frightened, exhausted, but alive, and the first word he had cried out was Mom. Now, sitting in the warm kitchen, he looked almost like a different child. He wore a green long-sleeve shirt too big for him and held a mug of warm milk between both hands. His face was still thin, but his cheeks had regained color. His expression held a shy curiosity, the kind that lingered in children who had seen too much but were trying to remember what safety felt like. When he saw Orin, he straightened slightly, eyes bright. "Hi," he said softly. His voice was small but steady. Orin nodded. "Hey, kiddo, how are you holding up?" Marlin looked to his mother, then back to Orin. "Better. I sleep now without the noises." Elara's gaze softened. "Nightmares," she explained quietly. "But they're fewer." The boy set down his mug and slid from the chair. He approached Orin with hesitant steps until he stood right in front of him. "Mom says you saved us," he said. Orin felt heat rise to his face. "Your mom gives me too much credit. It was Cora who—" "No," Marlin interrupted with the seriousness only children could muster. "Mom said people need other people, and dogs need people too. You helped her help us." Orin swallowed around the lump in his throat. Cora settled beside Marlin, her tail sweeping gently across the floor. The boy wrapped both arms around her neck, burying his face in her fur. Elara stepped closer, her voice warm and quiet. "I still don't know how to repay any of you." "You don't need to," Orin said. "You're safe. That's enough." Outside, a soft breeze drifted across the wetlands, stirring the tall reeds into a slow, rhythmic sway. Elara glanced out the window, exhaling with a peace that seemed newly earned. "We'll stay here for a while," she said. "Marlin loves it. And Cora, well, she finally sleeps again." Orin nodded, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Something inside him, something that had been broken since the failed rescue long ago, felt mended. Not entirely, but enough to breathe again, enough to believe he could carry hope instead of guilt. He stepped onto the porch, Cora padding beside him. The sunlight warmed his skin and the puppies tumbled after him in a chaotic parade. Elara joined him at the doorway, her smile soft and full of quiet gratitude. "You saved us, Orin," she said. He looked down at Cora, who lifted her head proudly toward her pups. "No," Orin answered. "She saved all of you. I just followed where she led." A gentle breeze swept across the marshland, carrying with it the smell of wet earth, budding leaves, and the lingering whisper of a story that would forever bind their lives. For the first time in a long while, Orin let himself smile into the dawn. In the quiet glow of dawn settling over Sablemarsh, The world seemed to pause, as if heaven itself leaned closer to witness the reunion of a family once lost to the storm. Some might call it chance, others luck, but those who have walked through the hardest nights know better. Sometimes God sends his miracles in the shape of a loyal dog, a stranger who doesn't turn away, or a small light that refuses to die in the darkness. Cora's devotion, Oren's courage, and a little boy's will to survive were not just parts of a rescue. They were reminders, holy, humble reminders, that even in the loneliest marshes of our lives, none of us are ever truly abandoned. In our everyday moments, while we cook, drive, fold laundry, or sit quietly by a window, we often forget the gentle miracles happening all around us. A kind word, a helping hand, a heartbeat beside us, a small spark of hope we didn't expect. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share it with someone who needs to remember that light still breaks through the darkest storms. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and maybe share a moment when you felt God's hand guiding you in your own life. And if you want more stories of courage, loyalty, and grace, stories that remind us of the unseen angels walking this world on 4 legs or 2, please subscribe to the channel. It helps these messages reach more people who might need a little hope today. May God bless you, protect your home, strengthen your family, and grant peace to your heart. And may he send you your own Cora. When the night feels too long and the road feels too cold,